Chapter 102. Sometimes we ran storylines for big, important reasons. Sometimes we ran them for smaller ones. But I don't understand, Virginia, the NPC said, frowning. If we're trying to get away, why are we loading a couch onto the truck? Shouldn't we just go? I told you, Isaac said, rolling his eyes. We need furniture in the back of the big moving truck so we don't bounce around on our escape. Now, if you want this to go faster, you could help. Virginia shriveled away, averting her gaze. That's what I thought, Isaac said at the end of his rope. Just ignore the NPCs, Avery scolded him. They are trying to guide us to what we're supposed to do next. They are not just messing with you. They are messing with me, Isaac muttered. They are, and none of you believe them. He stopped mid-sentence and yelled, Eustace. Eustace, you get up off that bed right now. What are you doing lying down? Did you think you would take a nap? I swear, on everything holy, if you NPCs don't just stand here and wait, I'm gonna lose it. We had put him in charge of NPC wrangling, which comedians were supposed to be skilled at. Goodnight Neighbor had a simple storyline, maybe not an easy one, but definitely a simple one. It took a little bit of willpower and some planning, but if you worked around the limitations of the story, it had something to offer, something we sorely needed at Kimberly's loft. Furniture. All the furniture we could ever want, or, more exactly, all the furniture we could load into the back of one moving truck with a 12-foot bed. Kimberly had gathered a posse and dragged us to the storyline. What do we have left to load? Avery asked. Just all these mattresses, Kimberly said, and that lamp over there with the gold trimming. I love that one, Avery said. She paused for a moment and then continued, I also think we should also get a new shower curtain. Oh, absolutely, Kimberly agreed. I wasn't trying to criticize, but, oh, I know, Kimberly interrupted. The silver one doesn't go with the bathroom. It's just, if we're already here, we might as well, Avery finished. Exactly, Kimberly said. Exactly, Avery said. I wasn't there to help pick out the furniture. I was just there to help lift it and, hopefully, keep us on track so we didn't die to the night neighbors. Mattresses? Check. All of the blankets and bed sheets we could ask for? Check. Enough chairs so everyone could sit down? Check. Couch? Check. Lamp? Check. It was all really coming together. Eustace. Get up off the chair. Isaac screamed at the elderly NPC who was along for the ride as we hid from the night neighbors. The irony of hiding inside a furniture store, filled with comfortable places to sleep, while running from a plague of mimetic monsters that could travel through people's dreams was not lost on us. In fact, I had to assume it was intentional on Carousel's part. But Goodnight Neighbor was a great storyline in a lot of ways. For one, it only had 2 level variations, level 27 and, later, level 60. If everyone in your party was under level 60, you got the level 27 variation. It was super useful, even if the furniture in this version was a bit bland. The store was having a going out of business sale. This storyline was a bit of a sandbox. There were infinite varieties of possible endings and win conditions. Players from yesteryear liked it for looting furniture. I wasn't going to complain. A little home decor would really make Kimberly's loft feel more like home, and the fact that we were getting it all for free was the icing on the cake. If you have to run storylines, might as well get a new couch out of it. Alright, do we have everything we need? I asked as we loaded the last of the items onto the back of the truck in the loading bay. Kimberly looked around the store, clearly wishing we could take more. Kimberly, I said firmly, come on. We can always come back. She grabbed a pillow off one of the display beds and said, yes. This is good enough for now. Alright, I said. We don't go on screen until someone falls asleep. Well, good thing, Isaac said. These NPCs have been trying to sleep this whole time. It's like they're on the night neighbor's side. In a way, they probably were. I looked at the NPCs, an older woman, an older man, and a young boy. We rescued who we could but our numbers had thinned. This was probably the worst day of their life, perhaps even of their real lives, and all we could ask was that they stay out of the way so we could load furniture onto the back of a truck. Places, people, I said. We all scattered around the store. Not going on screen until one of us fell asleep was an insidious tactic. That's how the pattern of the movie had been going so far. It was a cruel irony that balanced the entire story. No matter what your stats were, you still had to sleep. And Carousel would leave you stranded without the plot cycle moving forward until one of you did. And once you went to sleep, you didn't get back up, not after that hypnotic signal went out over the radio and TV, awakening some sleeping people's inner night neighbor. It spread from person to person. If you fell asleep, you would stay that way forever, your mind acting as real estate for the night neighbors, as an antenna, extending their power. Once enough people got infected and fell asleep, they were strong enough to overthrow the entire town. And I was going crazy wanting to know what they looked like. They were supposed to be spooky looking, but not in a scary way, more in an off-putting, liminal monster kind of way. Basically human, but something was off about them. I had found a child's drawing of one. Creepy men of odd proportions and odd smiles. So, as the atlas instructed us vaguely, we were left in the furniture store, loading as much stuff as we could get our hands on. We all spread out around the store, doing our own thing. Isaac was in the back room where there was a 20-year-old computer, playing a video game. Kimberly and Avery were chatting. I just wandered around until, finally, we went on screen. "I see you," the voice rang out around the store. "You thought you could hide, but you could not. And now my neighbors are coming." We all stood up slowly from where we had found ourselves and moved toward the center of the furniture store, where the sound was coming from. Eustace was a winner. He was the first to fall asleep. Eustace lay back on the sofa, his body slack as though sleep had stolen every ounce of tension from him. But his face was wrong. His lips twisted into a goofy, exaggerated grin, and his eyes, though closed, darted beneath the lids as if watching some warped pantomime behind them. "Don't you want to come with us?" he said, the voice emerging light and airy, tinged with a sing-song cadence that was completely out of character. It wasn't Eustace's voice. The crotchety old man with a gravelly baritone was gone, replaced by something that sounded dreamy yet ancient. Each word hung in the air, unnervingly playful like a clown inviting you to step behind the curtain of its grotesque carnival. "To the land of dreams," the voice cooed, stretching the words like taffy, sweet, and sticky, drawing us closer at first despite ourselves. "It's warm here and soft, like sinking into a feather bed that never ends. Don't you want to rest those weary bones? Aren't you so tired?" We all took a step back, instinctively moving away from the thing Eustace had become. But it sat up suddenly, snapping to attention in a jerky, puppet-like motion that made my stomach churn. The grin widened, impossibly wide, almost splitting his face in two. "You've worked so hard, haven't you?" it crooned, tilting its head at an unsettling angle. "Running, hiding. And running again. Always awake. Doesn't it hurt? Wouldn't it feel better to just stop? Just for a moment? Just long enough for us to reach you." The voice shifted again, growing deeper, slower, almost echoing within itself. "We are coming," it said, the sweetness gone, replaced with something ancient and raw, like the groaning of a rusted gate opening into darkness. The air in the store felt heavier, like it was pressing against my chest, squeezing the breath from me. The lights overhead flickered, and Eustace, or whatever had taken hold of him, began to laugh. It started as a giggle, high-pitched and childish, but quickly devolved into a cascade of unsettling sounds, wheezing, cackling, and guttural gasps. "You can't run forever," it whispered, the words cutting through the laughter like a razor. "You're all so deliciously fragile. Sleep will find you. It always does. And when it does, we'll be waiting." Eustace's body slumped forward, his grin faltering for a moment before snapping back into place. His head bobbed like it was too heavy for his neck, the laughter still bubbling from him like a broken record. "Come play with us," he said, the voice returning to its sing-song lilt. There's no pain here, no fear, no struggle. Just dreams. Sweet, endless dreams. I felt my feet falter as if the words themselves were trying to pull me closer, to draw me into whatever void he spoke of. I was tired. So very tired. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to look away from Eustace's grotesque grin, and turned to the others. Sorry, Eustace, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I turned to the others. Let's go. There's a truck in the loading dock. We can make a break for it. Eustace, or the night neighbor, leaned back into the sofa, his laughter subsiding into a low hum. His head lolled to one side, and his eyes fluttered open just a crack, revealing nothing but wide. We'll see you soon, he murmured. One by one, you'll come to us. They always do. But where do we run? Kimberly asked. Where in the world can we run where we won't need to sleep? I shook my head. I don't think they can follow us forever. I think they are geographically stuck near their house. The windows began to shake throughout the store as Eustace started laughing. The night neighbors were here. No longer bound to the world of dreams, though wanted to put us down for a nap. He said. If we drive far enough, I think we can escape it, I said. We had better be able to. That was what all the research I had done in the party phase indicated. The same thing had happened at a military outpost 20 years earlier. Everyone affected had died in their sleep, and those who survived did so by staying awake long enough for the afflicted to pass. They did it hopped up on amphetamines. We had learned from their wisdom. Isaac more than the rest of us. We have to try it, Avery said in her thick southern drawl. That or we lay down dead. Kimberly nodded. Let's go. So that's what we did. We loaded into the truck that just happened to be filled with furniture, because of course it was. This was a furniture store. No one in the audience would ask questions. I got behind the wheel, Kimberly climbed in next to me, and the others loaded into the back. And we just drove. Drove until Carousel became a distant memory behind us. But as we drove, we found others who had tried the same. Miles and miles of people had pulled off to the side of the road. They still slept in their cars. As we drove, we passed the occasional sleepwalker, subconscious runners attempting to escape the fate consuming them but unable to truly be free. How will we know? Kimberly asked me when we were on screen next. How will we know we've gone far enough? I put a serious look on my face but didn't answer, in that vague sort of ending where my character secretly knew we were doomed but was just trying to keep everyone's spirits high. We had been awake for nearly 2 days, and in the world of the story it had been 4. I was getting tired. And then I heard it, that voice. You'll never get away from me, the night neighbor said through Kimberly's mouth. I turned to her and saw that she had slipped into sleep. I started to scream. And then I woke up, still driving the truck. I had nodded off on the road. I looked to my right, and Kimberly was there. Is everything okay? She asked. Yeah, I said with a smile. Everything's great. The end. ... We kept driving, and soon enough, we found that although we had been driving away from Carousel for 40 minutes or so, for the storyline, we were somehow driving back toward it. We re-entered the city limits just as the story ended. We drove toward an office park where we found Ramona waiting for us. She had been the first blood of the story. Second blood had been the rest of the town. She climbed in as Kimberly scooted over. That wasn't so bad, Ramona said. You should go to Dreamland sometime. We're waiting for you. Don't start with that stuff, I said. I'm already going to have a hard time getting back to sleep tonight. Ramona and Kimberly laughed as we drove all the way back to Kimberly's loft and parked right in front of it. When we got out, Silas appeared to give Isaac a stat ticket but nothing else. Ramona got 2 stat tickets and a hysteric trap that would let her use Moxie to stay energized and awake. For her, this was a pretty difficult storyline. She had been a blood sacrifice, after all. Were the night neighbors as beautiful as I imagined? I asked Ramona. I did cry when I first saw them, she said playfully. but I don't think it was because of their beauty. Who knows? As soon as we showed up, the others appeared to help us unload the truck. We had to do it before the omens started showing back up. Finally, after so long, we had a bit of furniture. We had mattresses to sleep on, just a bunch of generic twin-sized ones, nothing fancy. We had a nice big couch, or at least one that could fit inside the back of the truck. It was a nice haul. Aunt One and some of the others had done a grocery run with the final straw. We had a functioning little guild. I had run this storyline while I planned our next real move. The warning I had received from one of them in the theater had scared me to my core. I didn't even know if I could tell anyone. Surely, they were listening. If I mentioned that one of their people had warned me, would there be consequences? I didn't know. But I had to find out. If we had to move forward, I knew what to do next. I had been planning it for months. Longer, even. We were going to rescue Anna and Camden. The others would get on board. The audience wanted a show. I had one in mind. Chapter 103. You have to choose your battles in Carousel. We had chosen Stray Dawn, and we had won handily. Now, we would never have to fight that battle again. So, we decided it was okay to spoil the story to the others. We all piled into the living room on our new chairs. The girls got the couch. Chivalry was undead in Carousel. We were having a movie night, and we decided to watch Stray Dawn. Not the version we had just played, no, we wanted to watch the VHS we had rented so long ago. We wanted to watch Stray Dawn, The Mark. It was a movie starring the Bowlers, and while seeing our old friends again brought a certain pain, it also brought joy and nostalgia. We came to find that this version of the movie, altered by Grace's Detective AA, was very different from the version we had played. It was about two sisters, played by Grace and Bella, who moved to a small town called Southeastern Carousel that was run down and in financial ruin. This version of Southeastern Carousel was much more like the one in Carousel proper. It had many tourist attractions, but not the expensive kind. Southeastern Carousel wasn't a tourist destination, it was a tourist trap, with all kinds of gimmicky places to spend your money, like a mountain you could climb to witness UFOs or an actual working wishing fountain. The few streets that comprised downtown Southeastern Carousel were filled with souvenir shops. A strange cult of overly polite congregants could be found holding signs condemning gambling and begging everyone to repent. Their compound was up on a different mountain, where they had a giant statue of the god they worshipped. I didn't get a chance to look at it when we were last there, but I did see that admission to the statue cost $5. Everything in Southeastern Carousel seemed to cost $5. You wanted your palm read, your horoscope, or a word from a deceased loved one? They all cost the same. There was a museum of oddities, similar to those Ripley's Believe It or Not buildings that were built upside down back in the real world. It was filled with all sorts of illusions and surreal attractions. The Atlas said not to go in there because literally nothing in that building was an illusion. The point was, it was a good place to lose money, especially if you kept going southeast and found the casino, whose jingle we knew so well. It was that sort of place. Every state, heck, every country, probably has a town like that. They probably had several. Southeastern Carousel had every horror story that had ever arisen in places like that. Honestly, I really wanted to go down there just to look around, but we didn't have the money to waste. Anyway, Grace and Bella rolled into town looking for a new start, getting jobs and meeting people. Unfortunately, the people Bella met were members of a noisy motorcycle gang led by the rough and tough Serena. Bella wanted to be like Serena, and luckily for her, this being a werewolf movie, she had just the chance. Meanwhile, Grace was the main character and tried to save Bella from herself while simultaneously solving the murder of the curator of the Museum of Oddities. She lined up her suspects and found out that the murderer was Reggie Varga, of all people. But it was okay because the curator, it turned out, was evil himself and was using a magical stone to control the werewolf motorcycle gang. I didn't know which part was harder to look away from, the implied romance between Bella the bully bruiser and Serena the werewolf, or the fact that Reggie and Grace were also given a subplot originally meant for lovers despite them being brother and sister. I thought Carousel must have been messing with them. It was supposed to be a single-quote 80s movie, so that type of stuff wasn't exactly out of place, but still, it gave us a strong case of the giggles to watch them literally shake hands during a close-up shot as the sun rose at the end of the movie in a scene that would have usually called for a kiss. I had heard of movies turning romantic subplots into friendship subplots and vice versa, but that was something different. The movie ended with them defeating the undead curator once again and Serena and her motorcycle gang of werewolves riding off into the distance with Bella, who had found her new life. Of course, that wasn't to mention the terrifying second half, during which the other team members were torn to shreds at the curator's behest. But still, overall, the movie reminded me of The Lost Boys more than anything. Yeah, it was The Lost Boys but with women in their 30s and a random murder mystery thrown in. Still, we hooted and hollered at every victory, we gasped at every death, and we clapped when the thing was over. Something that I didn't get a lot of, even though I had watched a lot of horror movies, was the experience of watching them with people. I had missed out on that. Sure, I had gone to theaters doing double features that got sold out and were filled with avid fans, but I had never had any friends of my own to go with. I had to come to Carousel for that. And as the credits started to roll, I knew it was my time to ruin the fun. Because we had work to do. I stood up in front of everyone as the movie ended, and I flipped on the light. I needed to make sure that everything I said was clear and easily understood. I needed everyone to be on the same page. As soon as I got up there, Kimberly was looking at me like she could see something had been weighing on me, and she knew I was about to lay something heavy on them. I had tossed and turned, agonizing over how to tell them, over whether I should. But I had no choice. I had to get the ball rolling. "We need to move up our plans," I said. They looked at me expectantly. Were they surprised or confused? Or did they just not know which plans I was talking about? We had so many plans. Plans to earn new rescue tropes. Plans to find other bases to stay at. Plans for grinding levels. Plans for escape. How could they possibly know which ones I meant? "We need to rescue Anna and Camden soon," I said. "Now?" "Now?" Ant-Man asked. "Why now?" "We were going to let the others level up for a bit." "What changed?" I cleared my throat. "Information has come to light, and I'm not sure if I am supposed to know this or tell you this." "I just don't know," I said. I let that hang in the air. "You know how I go to the theater when I die. How there are people there. Audience members, workers, I don't know them. The people behind it all?" I looked out over their faces. Everyone knew what I was talking about. Even Logan and Avery had been let in on my little secret by then. It was hot news. I was that strange film buff, after all. The rumors of my odd encounter with them must have been great gossip. "I heard them talking after Stray Dawn," I said. "I didn't know if telling you this was a good idea or bad." "I still don't." I took a deep breath. "I think you need to know regardless." "What happened?" Kimberly asked. Heck, she wasn't the only one. They were on pins and needles, practically begging me to spill the beans. Hopefully, they weren't the only ones. First, when Kimberly triggered the secret lore, I said, they were talking about how it was weird we could do that because we hadn't talked to the maid at the tavern, whatever that means. "I don't know. I guess we have more research to do on secret lore." "Maid at the tavern?" Antoine repeated. "What maid? What tavern? What does that have to do with Anna and Camden?" They speculated for a bit. "We'll look into that," I said. I looked at Kimberly and Antoine. That isn't the part one was most concerned about. So, after I heard that, I was listening, trying to catch every whisper from them, everything I could. I heard something I don't think I was supposed to hear. I paused for a moment and then continued. They said there was talk of them abandoning us. That we needed to be moving forward, and we weren't. There was a whole discussion about it. I guess they thought I couldn't hear them. Everyone reacted as I assumed they would, confusion, denial, and questions upon questions. What exactly did they say? Logan asked me, serious for the first time since I had met him. Exactly what I told you. We aren't doing enough. Maybe we aren't entertaining enough, or we aren't making enough progress, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I went on to tell them everything the woman had told me about through lines and such, though I didn't reveal that it had been her to say it. If we were being watched, I didn't want to burn a potential ally. I didn't know if the woman who whispered to me was a friend or foe, but I couldn't be too sure. What did it all mean? Kimberly thought it might mean the audience was going to stop watching altogether. And one thought it was more than that, that these secret, anonymous people who helped Carousel function in some unknowable way would just abandon their post, and suddenly, many of the features we had gotten accustomed to would stop working. Still, Logan theorized that the entire system was going to shut down. That we would be stuck in this monstrous world, and everything designed to keep us from getting torn apart as nature intended would suddenly stop working. No more tropes, no more plot cycle, no invisible barriers keeping monsters inside their lairs. No script telling serial killers to act like normal people. Chaos. Basically instant death at that point, he said. They continued to discuss and suggest things, just as I intended. Hold on, I said, increasingly close to losing my calm. What I know for sure is that if things are about to get worse, we need to do our rescuing right now. I don't know if everything's going to shut down, but if it does, we need to get Anna and Camden back before that happens. We can't leave them there. I didn't have to fake the emotions. They were really there. There was silence for a moment, and then Ant-Man said, "We can do it. Our levels aren't that far off from what they would need to be. Heck, we're not any more underleveled for post-traumatic than we were for straight-on. With a good strategy, we can do the rescue. It doesn't have to look pretty." It didn't have to look pretty. It probably wouldn't. We sat and discussed everything we knew about post-traumatic. While we didn't have a lot of plot details from the Atlas, we had learned some things, like how savvy and hustle were important. And since it was essentially a torture plot, we would need grit. "Is that why you put 3 stat tickets into grit?" Cassie asked me. "Yes," I said. "That's why. No use feeling all that torture. I figure that I'm going to be second blood, given the nature of the story." And Gwen looked at me and said, "So you're planning on using your rescue trap?" "I think it's the best bet, but we can discuss that," I said. "We may have to prep for it, but it won't be the first time we've set traps. And I figure we have a jailhouse with stone walls and metal bars. Time travel, however it works in that storyline, is complicated. Why go chasing a plot when we could make the plot come to us? Might simplify things." Bobby's new rescue trap was a real contender. My worry was that it would be hard to prep for. Mine gave us a solid setting that we could plan around. We had already determined it was better than Kimberly's. These were things we had discussed, but we had mostly discussed them in a hypothetical, far-off, distant plans kind of way. I needed us to go forward with it now. So that's what we did. We got up from watching the movie and started our planning. We had spent our entire time in Carousel waiting for an opportunity. This time, I was going to make the opportunity. All I could hope was that somewhere in a far-off building, they were listening. Chapter 104. Kimberly kept the letter Anna had written us. She stored it in her bag, the one she used her luggage tag on. It was pressed inside a little book on home repair she had found at the bed and breakfast after we beat permanent vacancy. We sat around the table and read it again, the memories flooding over us. "Dear Riley, Kimberly, and Antoine, if you're reading this, that means Silas agreed to Camden's plan. Camden is a genius, by the way. This was all his idea. I'm sure you know this by now, but the helicopter ride we were meant to take to our storyline was doomed. We ended up running to the roller rink Riley pointed out near the airport. Reggie used a trap to sacrifice himself so that we could get there in time to beat the black snow. I hope he survived. I wish I could tell Grace how much of a hero he was. The storyline was called Post-Traumatic. It involved time travel. Camden tells me I cannot say too much because we don't want to spoil the story. Suffice it to say, he realized Carousel didn't use real-time travel to make the story work. It just recreated the past. He figured that a version of the Carousel Atlas existed in the past, so we went to pick one up. It was amazing. As much as I would like to say that we are going to try our best and conquer the storyline just the two of us, I know that isn't realistic. When Camden passes, I will officially be the last one alive and Silas will show up to give me my aspect. I will attach the atlas to the back of Silas so other players don't see it. It contains information that they should never see. I had written up pages and pages to send. I wanted to talk about the times we shared before Carousel. I wanted to talk about the feelings I have for each of you, and I wanted to tell you how much I love you all. I didn't include those because Camden showed me the Atlas Holder's journal. In those writings, I found hope. Horror, too, but above all else, hope. You don't need me to send you a letter telling you how I feel because I want you to come and save me so I can tell you in person. I will choose the girl next door aspect. I think it fits my personality the best. Look it up in the Atlas so you will know what to expect when you come to save us. With love, Anna. P.S. Camden says hello. He is in his own world right now marking up the Atlas so that you can find the important information quickly. He isn't feeling very well either. The feelings were still so raw. It was finally time to finish Camden's plan. We were going to rescue them. I looked up the girl next door aspect for the final girl, like Anna had asked us to. I had read it a dozen times at least. It was perfect for us. Final girls, it seemed, were designed to set up their team's rescue. That's why they got to be the last one alive. I read the aspect trap aloud. The heart. Type, rule buff. Archetype, final girl. Aspect, girl next door. Stat used, Moxie asterisk. The final girl is the heart of any team she is on. As long as the heart still beats, the team may live. Lone survivor. The player will participate in their own rescue. As a girl next door, you are the heart of your team, and once you are the lone survivor, you may choose to end the story instantly, never needing to feel death's embrace, and keeping all character progress and narrative momentum you had previously. When a rescue team arrives, you will reawaken as the main character of the rescue storyline. Allies will be subtly buffed when protecting the player. This ticket is granted after the player is the last one alive following the achievement of Plot Armor 21. Selecting this ticket aligns you with the girl next door aspect. As long as blood pumps in your veins there is hope. Whether it pumps through your veins and then out an open wound is a separate question. That was the final girl's gimmick, they could participate in their own rescue. Having her there to fill us in on everything that had happened would be a huge asset. We're going to see Anna again almost instantly, Ant-Man said. And she won't be locked in a cage or turned into a dumb NPC. We just might be able to pull this off. We just might. We talked for a bit about general strategies, things we had to shop for, to prepare. We were going to use Isaac's writ of habitation for the old jailhouse. It was built in a way that was easy to defend, but against a time traveler, there were plenty of opportunities for Carousel to throw a curveball, but that wasn't a flaw. If we tried to plan a way out conflict, Carousel might get angry. We would have to adapt to whatever situation we came across. There was truly no telling what might happen. We didn't have a lot of information on post-traumatic as a storyline, not from the Atlas, at least, but we did have one good source. I had seen the trailer for the movie with my coming to a theater near you trap that allowed me to see trailers for other storylines being played. I didn't get a lot of use out of that one, seeing as there were no other players than us, but it had delivered on the day I received it. Surely, that was no coincidence. Our friends in high places, our mysterious insider pulling the strings from who knows where, they had given us enough information to save Anna and Camden. Why they helped us, I didn't know. I didn't even know who they were. But I wasn't going to waste all the effort they had put in. I wasn't going to waste the sacrifices that had gone into making Project Rewind happen. I have to show you something, I said. I led everyone over to the small television that had a trap, allowing me to show them what I saw on the red wallpaper. I had told them about the trailer, but I hadn't shown them yet. There was no use traumatizing them until it was time. I turned the television on, and everyone gathered around to watch. They didn't take a seat. Instead, they silently stood as the trailer played, both in my mind and on the screen. Dark, foreboding music played in the background. The screen showed scenes of teenagers enjoying themselves at a roller rink. Everything looked vibrant and carefree. Laughter and joy filled the air, but the music remained heavy and ominous, creating an unsettling contrast. The screen faded to black as the sound of an explosion rang out. A strange, unsettling noise followed, a mix of a building collapsing and something far worse. The scene cut to a close-up of Anna, her expression troubled as she spoke. "You mean he's been traveling to moments in time where people are killed?" she asked. The room was dimly lit as Camden appeared, shaking his head weakly. "No," he replied. "He's targeting tragic events with that book. His amulets could only take him to points in time where humans suffered. The roller rink, the bridge collapse. Now he's creating his own mass casualty events." For a brief moment, the camera focused on a worn paperback book in Camden's bloodied hand. The cover, splattered with blood, displayed the title, "The Town of Carousel, Horrific Events Through the Ages." The trailer jumped to quick cuts of Anna and Camden sprinting down filthy alleyways and darkened streets, pursued by a menacing figure in an overcoat. A faintly glowing amulet around the figure's neck pulsed with an eerie rhythm. The tension rose, leading to a gut-wrenching moment. Camden was bound to a table, screaming in agony. His right arm was gunned below the elbow, and the ominous figure from before stood over him. One hand held the glowing amulet, while the other clutched a wicked ice pick. As the figure used it to torment Camden, the amulet's glow brightened, pulsing in sync with Camden's cries. The camera panned to a cluttered table covered in yellowed newspaper clippings, each depicting black and white photos of disasters, fires, floods, mass killings, all tied to Carousel's grim history. The next scene showed Camden, even more battered and bloodied, but somehow having escaped. "If we're going to stop him, we need to get ahead of him. Do it!" Camden shouted. The screen cut to Anna, her hands trembling as she held a power drill. Her face was streaked with tears, filled with uncertainty and anguish. "Do it!" Camden yelled again, his voice desperate. The shot lingered on Anna's back as the drill whirred to life. Camden's screams pierced the air. Around Anna's neck, the glowing amulet began to flicker and pulse, a sign that their desperate plan was working. The screen faded to black. Finally, the title card appeared, "Post-Traumatic." A narrator's voice declared, "Some scars don't fade in time." Now everyone knew what I knew. Everyone saw what I saw. And they were quiet, because what could you say after watching something like that? We always steered clear of the torture storylines, and yet here we were, ready to dive into one. I had taken the energy out of the room. I felt bad about it, but there was no getting around it. We were about to do something that would be incredibly painful. It was normal to be scared. "So, shopping tomorrow," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Kimberly, who had been very somber and had teared up at the sight of Camden with his injuries, nodded and said, "Yes. Early morning. Business and pleasure." That was all she managed to say. Having completely killed the atmosphere in the room, I decided to climb to the roof, as I often did, to read the most evil book I had ever held in my hands. The Town of Carousel, Horrific Events Through the Ages. I had been able to track some of Anna and Camden's movements just by reading through it. I had seen them as they surveyed disaster after disaster. I had read every word. I lay back on one of the chairs underneath the light. It was a starless night, a fitting backdrop for the thing we were preparing to do. I read back through everything, my notes absolutely filling the margins of the book. As far as I could tell, most of the horrific events depicted were taken from storylines, usually mundane ones. While there were tragedies I felt could only have a supernatural explanation, the book itself took a completely non-magical approach. That was ironic, given that we knew the bad guy used magic. In this final reading, I saw certain elements of the book in a different light. As the others gradually trickled up to the roof to get some air and hang out, I decided it was time to talk more about what the woman had whispered to me in the theater. I had told them everything, including her suggestion that we choose a through line, but I hadn't focused on it. We had made no plans. As I stared down at the book, I found a series of stars I had drawn into it, marking different tragedies, all involving one particular family, the Geiss. Why that family was so important, I didn't know. I also found it amusing that their history, as presented in the book, was completely different from the one shown in Silas Dearcon's throughline. It was, however, exactly as Silas had described it. No matter what, members of the Geist family always met specific fates. I meditated on this while staring at a picture of Lillian Geist, not the one transformed into a terrible monster by a mad scientist in the tutorial, but another version. This Lillian had survived an accident involving a boat propeller. Well, most of her had survived. I'll just say I didn't recognize her face in the picture. In this cursed history, Carlisle Geist and his immediate family had been drowned at the family boat docks by his personal assistant gone mad. In total, the Geist name was mentioned at least 10 times in the book. Most of the family members, I didn't recognize. What do you guys think about doing the Geist throughline? I asked. I didn't exactly expect enthusiasm. I mostly got silence as my response. Silas had created the throughline, and after we narrowly avoided involuntary servitude to him, Carousel had taken it and reworked it so we could pursue it on our own, or at least, that was how Silas described it. That was also how it appeared on the throughline tracker. The trip back into the far past, following the Geists one step at a time to unlock hidden mysteries, didn't sound so bad, as long as Silas Dearcon wasn't in control. There was always a town, and there was always a family. The question was, could we do that throughline while also pursuing others? It seemed the rules had changed on that matter, though I couldn't swear to what they were to begin with. Was it that we could only serve one narrator? We were just lowly players, why should we get to know the rules of the game? If uncovering the answers hidden in the past might help us escape one day, or at least understand what was going on, was it worth it? If our goal was to entertain the audience, might the reveal of the true nature of the Geist family keep them watching a little longer? The response to my question was not exactly enthusiastic. But given that the only throughline we had involved secret lore or running Carousel Zone, how many options were really in front of us? We would always be working on secret lore, but it was clear we hadn't yet figured out the right way to do it. The only person immediately on board was Ramona. She didn't go into detail, but we all knew why. Perhaps she felt that the version of her sister she knew was hidden somewhere in Silas' former throughline. I wasn't so sure. Silas had developed an entire sound stage with a unique version of Carousel when he was in control. I wasn't certain we'd ever go back there. I didn't want to go back there. Somehow, Carousel was even stranger without its usual omens. Anyway, I'm just throwing the idea out there, I said. If we ever wanted to start the Geist throughline, this storyline would be a good launching point. Anna and Camden seemed to figure out how time travel worked there. We could, too. I wasn't going to spend time trying to convince them. I couldn't even convince myself. Kimberly tried to make it seem like my idea wasn't bad, but I could tell she didn't like it. It was so difficult to make decisions about our future when we knew so little about what was going on. I closed the book and listened to the conversations the others were having, friendly ones, the kind you could almost hear if you weren't in Carousel. They were talking about going shopping and how excited they were to see Anna and Camden again. The truth was, we weren't going to move forward until we understood our place in this strange, horrific world. If only we could just get the truth, if only we could know who to trust, if only we had some way to talk to the insider or get a proper look behind the curtain. If only. Chapter 105 We were back at Happened Upon. The previous time we had been to the pawn shop, there hadn't been much of a selection, at least not anything we needed. But this time was different because we had played several storylines since then, and the stock was determined by the recent storylines that had been run. I was pleased to see that the weapons selection was far better, no doubt thanks to Stray Dawn having so many firearms and other killing tools. It wasn't like we could just buy a gun and that would be it. You needed a drop to bring a firearm into a storyline. But the storyline was different because we got to prepare a base to defend. So, while buying a sci-fi military-grade sniper rifle might not be realistic, police-grade weapons would make sense to be found at a jailhouse museum. The Atlas suggested that Carousel respected the base building, but the players didn't have free rein. We couldn't get greedy. We just made sure that there were a couple of handguns and a rifle available, along with ammunition. We chose the ones that would look the best in a museum. Some guns had the same basic design for over 100 years, so that part was easy. Unfortunately, those guns were usually slow to load. We managed to pick up one that was dark gray metal with a wooden handle. It was a big gun that would put a hole the size of a silver dollar in a cattle rustler. It was funny how revolvers had built-in drama because of how long they took to reload. Still, the revolver, a smaller handgun, and a rifle seemed reasonable to exist inside a jailhouse museum. We would have to cross our fingers. The good news was we could get them for cheap. The whole time we were in the pawn shop, Tar Bellows watched carefully. That was unusual because normally, he pretended not to even notice us until we were ready to make a purchase. The others were looking around at the various supplies available. We weren't all going on the post-dramatic storyline, but we were all working on it. We ended up getting hammers, screwdrivers, anything innocuous that could be used as a weapon in a moment of need. We had been by the jailhouse just to look in the windows at all the displays. We didn't want to activate the writ of habitation yet because it didn't last very long. Building tools, we're talking the basic stuff, could be very useful if we were smart. Unlike with Stray Dawn, we weren't aiming for the highest score possible. We just wanted to get the rescue done. A torture storyline was not something to get fancy with. We barely talked. The nerves were getting to us. Maybe that was why Tar was watching us. He was 6'5" and built like a bull. We could sure use a bruiser like him. If only, if only. I took a glance at the tropes he had on display, but there was nothing special. I was fidgety and nervous, and Tar could tell. "Got something on your mind?" he asked. "Always do," I said. "What are you looking for, exactly?" he asked. "Home defense," I said. He nodded. "That can be a tricky one. You can never be too safe." "Not in Carousel," I said. "Sure enough. You know, the best home defense can be a good guard dog," he said. "It's the bark that does it more than the bite." Was he giving us practical advice? Encouraging us to bring Bobby and one of his dogs along? Kimberly was right there next to me, or at least close enough to listen in. "But we were warned," she said. "If the dog gets killed, won't Bobby die too?" He looked at her like she was naive, to put it nicely. He didn't say anything at first, but that look said enough. "Wait," I said. "The warning that Bobby got when he got his dogs was that they couldn't get hurt because the audience doesn't like to see it. Are you telling us that that was just flavor and not a rule or something?" When Bobby got his license to bring those dogs into the storyline, it said that if the dogs suffered, Bobby would, too. We had taken that as strictly literal, but from the look on Tar's face, I was beginning to think that perhaps we had been foolish. Having a dog was not such an unordinary thing in a movie, even a horror movie. We called over Bobby and went through the entire scenario with him. After we were done, Tar pointed us toward an aisle that had some basic pet supplies, most of it used. Bobby picked up some leashes and collars, but I could tell from his face that he wasn't exactly excited about the prospect of turning his beloved pooches into guard dogs. Still, Tar had never given us a bum lead, the tutorial notwithstanding. All the while we were talking about this, I could still feel Tar's eyes on me. When the others had left to continue looking around, I finally turned to him and asked him what he was staring at me for. He shook his head. "Nothing I can say in polite society." What exactly did Paragons know? Were they more like NPCs who were bound by the script, or had he been to the theater? Was he privy to the things that the Whispering Woman had warned me about? One lesson I had learned since coming to Carousel was that, when in doubt, use your words. Are you talking about the audience abandoning us? I asked. He squared his shoulders and looked at me. He said nothing. You can't talk about the people in the theater, can you? It's one of the restrictions on the script, I said. But you do know about them. You know what they're planning over there, right? A fellow hears things, he said. We're going to move forward, I said. We're going to pick a through line. It's just going to take some convincing. He didn't seem sure, but I couldn't exactly have a conversation where he couldn't even acknowledge what it was we were talking about. All we knew about them, the people at the theater, was that they did not like to be referenced at all. It was as if they were on the other side of the fourth wall, a funny concept given how meta Carousel was. We could never mention the audience. Well, I didn't care much for that restriction. Unless I heard a certain axe murderer breathing in the distance, I was going to keep pushing until I got answers. Making decisions because we had no other choice was how we ended up in the tutorial. We needed real answers, and if they wanted us to move forward, they were going to have to give them to us. If I could just find a way to send that message without getting my head chopped off. A few old guns, some building supplies gathered from whichever stores we could safely enter, and a new plan involving some big dogs, that was what we headed back to Kimberly's loft with. The prep didn't stop there. We were hard at work. He's angry and scared, Cassie said. He says that they're after him, and he can run for eternity, but he'll never get away. Is he talking to you? Can you speak to him? Kimberly asked. Cassie lay on the couch, her eyes covered with a small cloth. She shook her head. He's talking to. No, he's arguing with himself. He keeps speaking over himself. I don't understand what they're saying sometimes, she said. Are they talking about who is chasing him? I asked. No, she said, not right now. But when they do, they are very afraid. Cassie was using her eye block trap, which allowed her to obtain information about supernatural enemies from outside of a storyline. She had been going for a while, which gave us good information in and of itself. Normally, she would get cut off by now. Since she wasn't, that meant our enemy had very low moxie, at least compared to hers. That wasn't necessarily a good thing. It meant that their other stats were going to be higher. He thinks he's being chased, Cassie continued, and he's talking about how they need to find a new hideout. But I think an older version of him, thinks that the younger one is being paranoid. So the enemy was being chased. That was an element Anna didn't mention and the trailers didn't reveal. That could be useful. I really liked having a bigger bad around. Oh, gods, Cassie said. It sounds like one of the bad guys has been grabbed and is being tortured. And I hear sounds, like sci-fi or magic sounds. He's screaming. She sat up from the couch. I'm blocked, she said. That took forever, Isaac teased. Can we be sure that she wasn't just daydreaming? Daydreaming? Cassie asked. I'm closer to being a real psychic than you are to being a real comedian. She threw the cloth that had been over her eyes at him. They continued with their brother and sister antics. That's good, I said. If there's more plot to this than just a drawn-out fight until dawn, we could use that. Something to take up screen time. Ant-Man asked. Exactly, I said. Maybe even something to help make up for our weaknesses. We talked about the various possibilities of what could be chasing a time-traveling serial killer. Once we had ruled out Time Cope and Doctor Who, our ideas started to come together. Kimberly, Antoine, and I had been doing most of the work, with Bobby upstairs preparing two of his biggest dogs for the role of their lifetime, and Dinah ever present, absorbing but not relaying any of her wisdom. Ramona watched, too, nervous but not saying anything. Even after a couple of storylines, it was still weird to watch someone have psychic visions for half an hour while everyone else sat around eating potato chips. All right, I'm gonna make the call, Kimberly said. Moments later, a familiar flamboyant talent agent's voice filled the room. Kimberly. It has been forever since you called me, Sal said. It had been a couple of days. Well, I couldn't wait any longer, she said. I was hoping you could tell me about post-traumatic. Didn't they get Riley Lawrence as a director on that project? They certainly did, Sal said. He's a real up-and-comer. Lots of gossip surrounding that one. You looking to attach your name to the project? I'm always looking, Kimberly said. Well, let me look at the details. Just a moment, he said, as the sound of paper being flipped through came over the speaker. Oh, here we are. Yes, I've been looking at the latest revisions of this script. This is actually kind of a reboot/sequel, a soft reboot, they call it. They are bringing back the main actress from the original movie that flopped and went straight to DVD. Really? Anna Reed. I like her, Kimberly said. I like her too, but she might be out of her league here, Sal said. But who am I to talk? In the original, they barely gave her anything to do. She just ran around, looking scared. I don't know what they were thinking. Hopefully, she'll be a more reliable lead in this one. Kimberly looked at me and then at Antoine. Anna wasn't just going to be in the rescue. She was going to be the main character. That must have been her trumpet play because plot armor level has a big influence on that sort of thing. Can you tell me about what role I might play? Kimberly asked. I sure could. Let's see. I spoke with the producer, and he said that if you were to join the cast, they could do a rewrite where one of the minor characters, a spunky museum director, could get rewritten to be a larger role. What do you think about that? I love it, Kimberly said. Can you tell me about the antagonist? Do we have an actor attached? Yes, they do. His name is Grant Leitner, and he is great. He'll have to play a dozen different versions of the same character. They are going to expand on his role from the original film. You know how reboots are, everybody's got to have a backstory. The faceless killer that tracks people through time isn't enough to put butts in theater seats these days. How about my co-stars? Kimberly asked. I had gotten so used to the various questions that Kimberly asked Sal. It was like she was running through the options on a dialogue menu in a video game. There was a reason she asked them. They tended to get the best results. Well, you have the construction foreman who's been doing renovations on the museum you work at, a big tough fella, and you also have the media relations manager, who, in a surprise twist, will be played by the director. This enemy really did have low moxie if Sal was being this open and honest. Though to be fair, Kimberly had just gotten a bunch of levels since the last time she asked about post-traumatic. Will there be a lot of traveling for the shoot? Kimberly asked. You know how I hate living out of motels. It will all be shot in Carousel, darling, Sal said. But yes, you will have to travel some. You can't shoot the whole thing in an old jailhouse museum. Not unless you want it going straight to DVD like the last one. What a strange place Carousel was, that the term straight to DVD was synonymous with permanent death. Any advice to really stand out? Kimberly asked after a few more questions that airballed. Well, strangely enough, I think this movie is going to rely on the director. We've got the actors, and the audience is absolutely ravenous. It's like they just ran through the previous seasons and are finally caught up. Nobody has patience these days. Everyone is anxious to see what he has planned. A chill went down my spine. What did they know? Was Sal controlled by Carousel or by them? Was there a difference? I understood that Carousel would know all my secrets, but the others, the game makers, felt more invasive, strangely. That was Sal's last contribution. She asked him more questions, but even with her huge moxie advantage, he was done talking. We had gotten a really good haul of information. Now, we just had to use it. As soon as she hung up, Antoine asked, So what do you have planned? Looking at me. A little tour of Carousel, I said honestly. I know we will end up in a jailhouse for the win condition, but I think we might want to play a game of hide and seek first. I do know a lot about Carousel's history. I've got some theories to try out. And we're going to power the tour through self-inflicted pain? Ant-Man asked. That is some good production value, wouldn't you say? You heard Sal. If we don't do a little bit of traveling, we're going straight to DVD. Ant-Man nodded. Then he looked at Kimberly, and they both looked back at me. Where's that demented history book? Ant-Man asked. We have some planning to do. Chapter 106. We found an old guitar in the jailhouse. It had the trop weapons of mass absurdity attached to it. Isaac had that same trop and had apparently used it on one of those yard rakes with an extendable handle and a storyline. Ramona told his story. He was facing off against the enemy of the groundskeeper, and right in a climactic moment, he clicked the handle to extend the rake out all the way. The trop imparted humorous weapons, a guitar, a leaf rake. Both were weapons to a comedian. It was a funny story. Everyone laughed as we relaxed in the office space of the jailhouse. It was a good time. Ramona gravitated to the guitar, tuned it up, and was soon playing beautiful, melodic songs that spread throughout the whole jailhouse. For the first time since we'd gotten there, the strange ghostly sounds from the basement stopped. There were a few cells on the ground floor. The floor above that was mostly used for storage. While the cells in the basement, with the ghosts, had actual mattresses, there was no way any of us were going to sleep down there. It just couldn't be done. Instead, we all camped out inside the main office, which had a nice plush carpet. We brought our blankets from Kimberly's loft. We were doing what was required to change our official base from Kimberly's loft to Isaac's jailhouse. We had to spend the night. It wasn't that complicated, luckily. If you weren't paying attention, the ghosts down in the basement just sounded like the wind. Ramona played the guitar, and with some prompting, they got Logan to sing a song. I had heard it before, but I didn't know its name. It was an old, sad country song. All 13 of us were jammed into that office, eating food from the vending machine in the break room and nervously talking about what was to come. I didn't mind it. The jailhouse was a scary place, but being surrounded by friends didn't just cancel out the scariness, it elevated it to something else. It was like we were sitting around a campfire. The spookiness actually comforted me somehow. Most of the time, you don't know which moments in your life you're going to be nostalgic for, but I found myself willfully living in every moment that night because I knew it might be our last happy night in Carousel, or anywhere else. No matter how we moved around the pieces, no matter how we tried to do the math, at the end of the day, our best bet was to bring our best players and our best strategies regardless of how well situated the remaining players were. Leaving someone with a rescue trap behind might appease the mind of an anxious man, but it wasn't really a better decision. If we lost, we would all lose, even those of us who didn't go on the storyline. If we lost, the audience might abandon us. If we lost, it was over. I had to tell myself that because there was definitely a voice in my head formulating a dozen different variations that would be smarter. That voice was deafening, telling me to be cautious, to just take our time, and a path will open up. Damn being smarter. Carousel was designed as a strategy game, but most of the time, you couldn't do the smart thing. At best, you had to do the dumb thing strategically. You couldn't just run when things got weird. You couldn't follow your rapidly beating heart away from the monster that you knew lurked in the darkness. You had to walk forward. It was in the town's bylaws. Wind blew through the jailhouse. Even though it had been retrofitted to be a museum, it was largely still in the same condition it had been 100 years prior. It was drafty. I couldn't sleep. Obviously, I literally could sleep. I had a trap just for that. I couldn't make myself trigger it, though. When I went to sleep, I would wake up, and it would be tomorrow. I felt like I would do anything to extend the time between that night and the next day. I got up from the room in the office and decided to do one last look through the jailhouse, the place that might hold our final stand. Most of the museum was on the ground floor. Everything was stacked away and packed up. The boxes were filled with nothing but those styrofoam peanuts. They were all props. I was sure this jailhouse had a history, but I didn't know it, not just by looking. I had been through the upstairs multiple times. It was all the same, a lot of cool props, but it was all skin deep. Once you started digging into it, You just found empty boxes. We knew that the jailhouse museum would be our character's place of employment, so I was certain that when we started the storyline, all those props would suddenly become a lot more detailed. The game makers, those mysterious people, would walk all through the set and exchange our boxes of styrofoam peanuts with actual artifacts from the history of this place, or at least stuff that would play the part. I found myself walking downstairs into the basement just to look. It was safe. The ghosts were locked in their jail cells. I doubted that Isaac's writ of habitation would last long enough for us to see any action on the ghost front. When I got downstairs, guided by the dim light of the moon and the flickering lights of the basement, I was surprised to see that I wasn't the only one who had the idea to wander around. It was Ramona, staring into one of the cells, one of the locked, haunted ones. When she saw me, she said, "It almost looks like someone is sleeping in that bed, like they pulled the blanket up over their head to block out the light." I stared in after her. It did look like that, but it also looked like some crumpled up cushions and blankets. If there was a ghost there, and I was certain there could have been, it was hiding itself on the red wallpaper. One perk of being a ghost, I supposed. "He's probably just blocking out the woman who's staring at him," I said. She smiled and punched my arm. We stared together for a bit. "So, you're going to be risking everything again?" she asked. "Didn't you just do that with the werewolves?" I took a moment to think before I answered. "When you're almost out of chips, you go all in every hand," I said. There's a metaphor. That should end the conversation. But it didn't. "And when you win, you don't win much," she said. That was true. We might risk it all and walk away no closer to our freedom. "Well, this life isn't much, but at least it's exciting," I said. She didn't respond for a moment. She just stared at the pile of fabric that might have been a sleeping ghost. "Everyone's talking about you," she eventually said. "They say you've got some plan that's going to set everything straight, but you can't talk about it." I hated that people were putting their hopes in me. It was a burden I could barely lift. "I do?" I asked. "Guess I better draw one up." She smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. She was nervous. I couldn't blame her. More than the rest of us, her future was nothing but question marks. What was her happy ending? We didn't talk about her situation. Like so many other conversations, this one turned into shop talk. We talked about storylines, plans, and the game. We must have talked for 10 minutes, just aimlessly. There was nothing else to say. "I'll go with you, you know," she said. "On the storyline. I'd probably end up first blood, but I'd still do it." "Thanks for offering," I said. "But your build is more about manipulating a storyline, and you're not high-level enough to be able to do that." "Oh," she said. "Sorry." "No," I said. "It's just being underleveled, being the first blood sacrifice in a storyline with a torturer, that's something I could never ask you to do." She stared into my eyes. "Isn't Lila going to be first blood?" Ramona asked. "Well, yeah, but it was Logan who asked her," I said. We laughed, until the ghost, the one that actually was a ghost and not just a pile of cushions and blankets, shushed us. I whispered, "Sorry. He must have been a man after my own heart. Even in the afterlife, all he wanted to do was sleep." I stared at the blanket, and now I could see it slowly rising and falling with the breath of some long-gone prisoner whose name I didn't even know. In a way, he was lucky. At least he knew where he stood. He knew his fate. What was our fate? I had no idea. While I was contemplating big questions, Ramona was contemplating smaller ones. I didn't know what those questions were, but I knew what her answer was. She kissed me. We weren't even on screen. It wasn't even scripted. She just did it because of nerves, or excitement, or the ambience of the old jailhouse, or maybe just because she wanted to. Sometimes, girls will just kiss you. You gotta watch out. Finally finding myself able to turn off my brain, I kissed her back. For the first time in a long time, I felt normal. Like Carousel didn't exist and I was truly living in the moment. Had I ever done that before? Lived in the moment? I couldn't remember. I already knew that that night was going to be one I remembered fondly. It was the first time in Carousel that I felt like the night was truly my own, our own. Those fleeting thoughts that maybe Ramona was a manifestation of Carousel weren't strong enough to ruin the moment. The moment stretched on, and time slipped away as we made memories. I knew I would value that night for the rest of my life, no matter how long it might last. I was glad to have an experience like that in that spooky basement jail where I had technically died once, of electrocution. I just wished I didn't have to share the moment with half a dozen ghosts and the prying eyes of the audience. I wondered if they were going to change the channel now. The next morning, we dropped all the players who weren't going to join us in the storyline off at Ramona's cabin. It was finally summer enough for her writ of habitation to go into effect. It was funny. It was always summer in Western Carousel, but you still had to wait before you could use that writ. The cabin didn't have any big drawbacks, it was just kind of small. It was in a beautiful location, and I imagined you could hear the banshee very well at night, even through the thick log walls and shuttered windows. We bid farewell to Ramona, Avery, Isaac, Cassie, Michael, and Andrew. The rest of us drew the short straw. We had bought them a mobile omen, something low-level, a toy soldier that I suspected was as aware of us as we were of him. If you took his gun, you would activate the omen. They had Isaac as a scout, but his scouting trap wasn't foolproof. If they needed to run a storyline or run from a bad guy, they could just activate the omen, and they would be safe as they trekked out to run it. Purchasable mobile omens had their place, after all. Ramona and I hugged goodbye. She didn't go for a kiss, and neither did I, but I could see in her smile that she enjoyed having a secret. I didn't think Carousel was a place to fall in love unless you were a lesbian werewolf, and I wasn't the kind of guy girls fell in love with, anyway. Still, of all my secrets, it was the most comforting. As soon as we started working back, Kimberly was giving me the "did I just see what I think I saw?" eyes. I didn't acknowledge her silent inquiries. We had a mission. The team ended up being me, Antoine, Kimberly, Dinah, Bobby, Lila, and Logan. Everyone had a job, a role, and we knew how to adapt depending on what Carousel threw at us. As we walked back toward the jailhouse, quite a distance from Lake Dyer, Antoine thanked Logan and Lila for helping rescue Anna and Camden. Lila said something like, "We owe you. We have to help each other." Logan, ever the straight shooter, said, "We are completely dependent on you all. If you're going to throw yourself at something like this, it's in our best interest to make sure you succeed. I just hope you know what you're doing." Not even a sarcastic quip. I would have killed for a sarcastic quip at that moment. If the storyline sounded scary enough to make Logan abandon his sardonic humor, it must have been really scary. But he was right. Every decision we made would affect them. As much as we wanted to pretend this was an alliance between teams forged of shared purpose, it was more than that. They needed us. We could not take them for granted. We walked to the jailhouse, did one last walkthrough to ensure all our preparations were ready, and then left for the roller rink. Carousel sounds so unserious on paper. Perusing the jailhouse museum and then heading off to skate the days away. I was excited and nervous and all sorts of other emotions. "We're going to see Anna soon," Kimberly said. I couldn't help but smile. That kind of instant gratification rarely happened in Carousel. Enter a storyline, see your dead friend. "We might even be able to see Camden," I said. "Depending on how the time travel works and whether the first movie is canon." "Let's not get too excited," Antoine said. "We have to keep our heads." That was an odd remark coming from Antoine, who a month earlier couldn't be found saying anything short of a positive affirmation. It was an improvement from where I was standing. We walked until we saw the roller rink, the one that occasionally stopped existing and was replaced by a giant pit in the ground. "Everything check out?" Antoine asked me. I double-checked all my inside tropes again, and everything was as expected. With our new levels, technically, post-traumatic might have even had less of a level gap than Stray Dawn, but it was also a much harsher subgenre of horror, with time travel thrown on top. As soon as we got into the story, we needed to get our bearings straight. We needed to know the lore, to understand what type of time travel we were dealing with, and what this enemy could conjure up against us. There was only one way to find out. We walked down the hill toward the roller rink. As soon as it reappeared, we stepped onto the asphalt of the parking lot. The rescue posters of Anna and Camden were held firmly in my hands. Our base was set to the jailhouse. We walked across the parking lot quickly, unsure if it would disappear on us. As soon as we reached the door, Antwan grabbed the handle. The moment I heard his hand hit the metal, everything went black, and all I could feel was the sensation of falling. Riley Lawrence is the film buff. His aspect is filmmaker. Filmmaker. The filmmaker has a comprehensive understanding of the filmmaking process. They can manipulate the game environment effectively, altering the game's dynamics in subtle but impactful ways. Their abilities are a mixture of meta-insight and meta-rule tropes. They have higher hustle, reflecting their ability to stay out of the way, stay alive, and remain unseen as they manipulate meta-movie elements. Riley has a plot armor score of 36, metal of 4, moxie of 9, hustle of 7, savvy of 9, and grit of 7. Free background trop. My grandmother had a gift. A background trop that gives Riley's character some ambiguous connection to the gift through his heritage. Current trop limit, 10. Trop Master grants him the ability to perceive enemy tropes, but at the cost of sacrificing half of his plot armor. As an oblivious bystander, Riley remains untargeted by enemies as he convincingly acts oblivious to their presence. Deadman War King buffs his grit considerably after death is imminent, stretching the moment of death out considerably. Method to the Madness allows him to speak in character with enemies off-screen. The Wrong Reel creates a rescue where the player finds footage related to the original storyline and is beset by the enemy. Quiet on Set allows the user to listen to the audio of the current on-screen scene while off-screen, depending on savvy and the information's value. Raised by Television buffs the user to do one big meaningful action if they establish their inspiration from film and television to establish it. Escape Artist buffs his hustle to help enact plausible escape plans. Director's Monitor grants the user death watch upon their character's death. Cinemaseer buffs allies savvy and grit when meaningful on-screen predictions come true. Tilda. Kimberly Madison is the eye candy. Her aspect is celebrity. Celebrity. The celebrity aspect treats the player like an actor in the storylines like films they sign on to. Using meta tropes to create hype, fan favoritism, and larger-than-life roles, the celebrity is the most versatile of the eye candy aspects. Using past roles to help their career, the celebrity can specialize in virtually anything if they have long enough to build a career. Kimberly has a plot armor score of 34, metal of 5, moxie of 13, hustle of 8, savvy of 1, and grit of 7. Free background trop. Current trop limit, 9. Convenient backstory allows her to believably change her backstory to assist with the current task, buffing the relevant stat. Does anyone have a scrunchie? Allows her to shift Moxie's points into another stat by putting her hair up. The penthouse. The character will get the nicest, safest accommodations in a multi-day storyline. The Hall of Fame. The user gains center of attention and will have a heightened role in the story regardless of casting. Meta-story elements are more central. Contract negotiations buffs the user's ability to improvise after discussing and their plan with Carousel. Carousel Academy Awards buffs her moxie based on the quality of her performance in the previous storyline. Breaking the veil of silence, the user will get warnings from knowledgeable NPCs. Outside of storylines, NPCs will warn of dangers to women and hint at storyline rewards. When in Rome buffs her grit until rebirth if her performance matches the tone of the movie. Social awareness allows her to see the moxie stat of all enemies and NPCs and intuit relationship dynamics. Tilda. Antwan Stone is the athlete. His aspect is Health Nut. Health Nut. The Health Nut is devoted to maintaining peak physical, mental, and spiritual health, highlighting their wisdom and their intelligent approach to fitness and well-being. Health Nuts use their high savvy to make strategic decisions, enhancing their overall endurance and adaptability in challenging situations. Their healthy lifestyle is reflected in their elevated grit, showcasing their resilience and ability to bounce back from setbacks. And one has a plot armor score of 33, Mettle of 9, Moxie of 4, Hustle of 7, Savvy of 5, and Grit of 8. Free background trop. Current trop limit, 9. Gym Rat buffs Mettle and Hustle by revealing athletic backstory. Brandishing a weapon is like a security blanket, buffing his grit and soothing his and his allies' fear. Willpower is magic, makes all applicable enemy technology or magic resistible through sheer effort. Results vary. Effects vary. This will hurt. Stronger together buffs mental health and healing when the user and allies are together in a group. Reload after cut takes the player off screen when reloading a weapon. Timeout allows him to send a fight scene off screen for a set time. Better Make It Count greatly buffs the last round of ammunition the player has available in a fight. The Mountain is a metaphor, boosts allies' uses of grit and savvy, and allows the user to conquer maladies through metaphor by tackling physical challenges. Coyote in a Trap plans that logically involve self-inflicted injury in a chase sequence or when captured have a greatly increased chance of success. Tilde. Logan Mays is the comedian. His aspect is cynic. Cynic. The cynic wields sharp wit and high savvy to navigate chaos, using insight and meta-irony to uncover truths and manipulate the narrative. Their imperviousness to meta-challenges makes them masters of reframing chaos, adapting quickly, and turning even the direst situations to their advantage. With sharp analysis and biting humor, the cynic thrives as a critical thinker and unshakable ally. Logan has a plot armor score of 29, Mettle of 6, Moxie of 4, Hustle of 5, Savvy of 8, and Grit of 6. Free background trop. Misspent Youth is a background trop that gives Logan's character some secret criminal or quasi-criminal history. Current trop limit, 9. Awfully Considerate Symptoms suppresses the effects of terminal illnesses, poisonings, and injuries until they are plot relevant. Unmoving Facade prevents the user from feeling pain if they willfully act like they are not in pain. Knock on Wood allows the user to assign first blood by sarcastically jinxing an ally. Gallows Humor allows him to ease mental pain with dark humor after a tragedy. Comedic Timing prevents the enemy from attacking while the user is quipping. Window Shopping allows the user to identify and know the rough monetary value of any object they look at, including rare, technological, or magical objects, especially if it fits their backstory. Via background trop, the voice of dissent bolsters the player's current plan when the user confronts the team's planner and forces them to clarify, justify, or modify it. Last Laugh retroactively buffs an attack when a humorous quip or similar is added to the end. If done well, this will end a fight scene. Class Clown attracts the focus of enemies through distraction, often cinematic or comedic. Tilde. Dinah is the outsider. No aspect has been chosen. Dinah has a plot armor score of 24, Mettle of 3, Moxie of 4, Hustle of 6, Savvy of 3, and Grit of 8. Free background trop. A Haunted Past, a background trop that gives her character some past trauma that haunts her, often literally. Current trop limit, 8. Guarded Personality resists all insight abilities. An outsider's perspective alerts her to new, out-of-place, or unusual information. Encouragement from beyond soothes her when stressed, scared, or in pain and may provide useful information in the form of communication from the beyond. Via background trop, They Fell Off allows her to get out of handcuffs and similar restraints quickly. Who You Truly Are increases her Pennsylvania as she performs her role. Makes her a major character in the finale with something important to contribute. Must start with the lowest base Pennsylvania. Borrowed from Riley. Savvy Safecracker tells the character how long it will take to pick a lock of some kind. Buffs hustle in the attempt. No Return Address gives the user insight from anonymous letters and allows them to send similar letters to allies. Outside Looking In grants her the ability to discern ideal spots to linger and observe events without actively participating in the narrative. Tilde. Bobby Gill is the Wallflower. No aspect has been chosen. Bobby has a plot armor score of 28, metal of 3, moxie of 8, hustle of 7, savvy of 6, and grit of 4. Free background trop. Actually, I'm a veterinarian. Changes his character's background to being an animal doctor. Current trop limit, 9. Background noise allows him to get background information from NPCs when off-screen. Last-minute casting recasts him as an NPC that is moderately involved in the plot. The selection is seemingly random. He will get some limited background information for the character and some access to the NPC script. Pure protects the user from enemy targeting if they avoid the storyline's principal sin, until they interfere with the enemy's agenda. Craft services are the real heroes. Ensures that there is edible food and water on set somewhere during the storyline. Character notes reveals general needs from allies until Second Blood, though specifics aren't provided. My only role as exposition gives him some useful information to be relayed on screen, but takes it away if he starts to bore the audience. If you can't see it, it won't bleed. Allows him to temporarily mend wounds by covering them from the audience's view. Via background trop, act like you belong. Lets the user blend into any scene by quickly adapting small, fitting elements like props or attire. However, all these elements must work together to maintain their cover. Animal Whisperer grants important animals the trop animals are psychic and allows the user to interpret their intuition. Via background trop tilde. Lila White is the wallflower. No aspect has been chosen. Lila has a plot armor score of 27, metal of 1, moxie of 4, hustle of 10, savvy of 5, and grit of 7. Current trop limit, 9. A hopeless plea begging for release forces the captor to verbally deny it. If they don't, persuasion might succeed. A scream in the distance. A loud scream sends the user off screen, allowing an ally who hears it to appear on screen. There's been a murder. Discovering a gruesome scene lets the user scream, initiating an investigative scene with applicable characters. Not important enough. Staying out of plot-critical actions keeps the user safe from intelligent enemies until the midpoint, where they are written off. Grants limited access to the script. Dying last scream. A realistic death scream sends the user off screen, allowing enemies to ignore them while gaining Deathwatch and the dead status. The Killer's Wake. Playing dead during a massacre allows the user to escape safely after the scene and provides knowledge of the complete script for that scene. A Cry in the Dark. A cry during peril alerts nearby allies to the user's location and status. Run for your death. Once death is imminent, the user is guaranteed a chase sequence before being killed for first blood. And that's Lunge. Extends breaks between scenes and provides a timer to all players. Borrowed from Bobby. Tope continued. Thanks for listening.